Booktube, we're back. Let's go over my top 5 sci-fi books of all time. Before we get into the books, I just want to say it's absolutely incredible that this community in a week has grown to, I don't know, 3,000, I think, subscribers we have now. I'm always blown away by the support. I'm always blown away by the comments, the recommendations that you gave in the last video. If you haven't checked out the last video and this is your first one, I did my top 5 fantasy series of all time. Definitely check it out. If you're over here from TikTok, welcome. This is where we do longer form content. This is where I try to dive a little bit deeper into books and I just yap, and yap. But I'm glad you all find it valuable enough to subscribe and to like and to come to this video. A couple more housekeeping things is this will probably be the last time I do a video down here. I know it's very premature that this has been only twice I've done this, but this will be the last time you'll see the fireplace, this background, because I'm going to take it upstairs to my bookshelves from that perspective there. All right, so sci-fi. Why is sci-fi my second favorite genre? So let's go to my first favorite genre first, fantasy. So fantasy, number one for me. And I think I outlaid it in a reason in my last video, but if you don't know, I always love escaping this current world that we're in, as good and as, challenging it can be, and go into other worlds and dive into like all the world building, all the different characters, all the magical systems. And I really love that being fantasy, and I think that's why fantasy will always be my number one. Now, number two being sci-fi is, while there are some realistic elements to most sci-fis, it also stretches your imagination of what could be possible. And so the books that I'm going to outlay here definitely draws that feeling out for me. And, as a kid, I always wanted to be an astronaut. And I know everybody says that, but I've always had an infatuation with space. I've always had an infatuation with, different realms or different timelines. And some of the books that we're going to go through here definitely embodies that from that perspective. So without further ado, let's go into my top 5 sci-fi books of all time. Before we dive into the books, I first off want to say that I don't have the physical copies of most of these books because, like I said, I'm moving this upstairs to my bookshelf, so they're all over the place. And number two, I did borrow some of these from the library, so I will be having some pre-imposed images up here, just as a heads up. And number two, let's go into an honorable mention first. So the first honorable mention that I want to go to is Dune. I'm sure people have watched the Dune movies. And hopefully you read the Dune book. I've only read book 1, but I can see how it is considered the grandfather of sci-fi. Almost every single subsequent sci-fi book that I've read since Dune, or even before Dune, has some Dune elements into it, right? Space travel, space operas, different timelines from that perspective. And it's hard to say you really like sci-fi or, you're into the sci-fi realm without reading Dune. Or even watching the movies. I'll give you that. You can watch the movies and be interested in the sci-fi genre itself. But after reading Dune earlier this year, again, I didn't read it way back when, I read it earlier this year, the elements just stick with me to that standpoint there. I won't go too far into Dune in terms of why it's an honorable mention, just because it's honorable mention. I'm sure you all want to know my top 5. But yes, Dune is one of the ones, for sure. Coming in at number 5, we have Morningstar. Morningstar is the third book in the Red Rising series, a series that really has been taking everything by storm. I know it's all over Book Talk. I know it's all over BookTube. And I tried it early this year. I read the first book, and first book was just okay for me. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I was like, all right, this is solidified. It meets the hype. And then a group of people yelled at me and screamed at me to read Golden Sun. And Golden Sun was absolutely insane. Insane. The ending of that was nuts. Didn't think you could top Golden Sun. And then I read Morningstar. And Morningstar was just chef's kiss. If it wasn't for the other books in this video here, it would be, probably higher. But Morningstar was so amazing. In terms of Red Rising series, it's really a big space opera. And you follow along the main character, Darrow, as he really just OPs all this stuff. By OP, I mean overpowered. Like, he is the character to follow. And in this series, there's so many other characters that really make this. Severo is probably one of my favorite characters of all time. And this series here is great, amazing. Will I continue the series? I don't know. Probably not, because I think I found something better than this series, which we'll go through a little bit later here. Also, the author is, at the end of the day, Morningstar, regardless of, its ranking in this, it's still number 5 for me. And I really glad I stumbled across it because it still solidified my love for sci-fi. And yeah, number 5, Morningstar. Coming in at number 4 is Ready Player One. Ready Player One is a sci-fi that has gotten me out of so many reading slumps. So many reading slumps. Like, I owe this book my life. And I wouldn't say it's a shame it's number 4 because I have read a lot better books than Ready Player One, sci-fi books than Ready Player One. But this one probably holds near dear to my heart just because I've gotten out of so many reading slumps just by reading this book. The movie was not great. The movie actually put me into like a movie slump. But in this is really like a video gamer's dream in terms of, Ready Player One, and maybe that's why I gravitated to that book so much. 2016 got me reading slump. 2020 got me reading slump. I think even 2022 it got me out of reading slump. Ready Player Two was a letdown for me from that perspective, but Ernest Cline and Ready Player One really tied in everything from a futuristic standpoint in terms of how games can really take over your life, and I really enjoyed the premise of that. Really enjoyed that, and again, it gets me out of so many reading slumps now. Yesterday, tomorrow, it's going to be a book that will always be solidified for me. So Ready Player One comes in at number 4 for me, for sure. Coming in at number 3, we have Dark Matter. So the majority of the books on this list are space operas. They take place in space, whether it's space war or just space in general. Dark Matter, as well as Ready Player One, is one of those ones that just takes place on Earth. And wow, there's a TV show out now for Dark Matter, which I actually haven't had a chance to check out yet, but I will do a video in the future comparing the TV show and the book. But the book, gas, absolute gas. Blake Crouch put everything he had into this book, and wow, absolutely insane. So Dark Matter is one of those sci-fi books that takes place within different timelines. So if we follow our main character, Jason, as he tries to find out who the real Jason is, please stand up, please stand up. He's obviously the real Jason, but his relatives don't know if he's the real Jason or not. And you follow the trials, the tribulations when it comes from that perspective there. And I ate this book up, and it turned me into a Blake Crouch believer. Then I checked out this next book, Recursion, which isn't in the series. It's a separate sci-fi, but Blake Crouch is that guy when it comes to sci-fi now after reading 2 of those books. But Dark Matter holds a special place for me because it actually got me out of a reading slump last year. And normally when I try to get out of a reading slump, I try to stay with fantasy, right? Or I go to like one of my self-help books. And I really threw myself out there to read Dark Matter, and I wasn't disappointed at all. Dark Matter solidified for me, number 3 for sure. All right, we are down to our last 2. Now, this book is probably number 1 on a lot of people's list when it comes to sci-fi, but for me, it's number 2, and it just recently moved to number 2 for me. Project Hail Mary. Project Hail Mary, written by Andy Weir, who is an absolute genius when it comes to sci-fi, is one of my favorite books of all time. So this is a space travel book when it comes to sci-fi. So like I said, most of these books on here will be space travel oriented. But this one is probably different from the other ones that I talked about in my number 1 book here when it comes to space travel, because this one is a race to save not only humanity, but the entire universe. You follow a character who was a teacher, turned into an astronaut, and you follow him throughout space as he tries to figure out how he can save just his planet from utter destruction. And while that sounds intriguing to some and maybe not intriguing to others, what really makes the book is the secondary character that comes seemingly out of nowhere. Rocky is one of my favorite characters of all time. Like, of all time. If I had to rank him, he's in my top 3 for sure. He really makes the story. You laugh, you shed some thug tears. You really just go through a range of emotions when it comes to this story, and one of the best stories you will ever read. And again, it does get real sci-fi, and that's why I like it, because it does get real sci-fi. But even if you aren't a huge sci-fi fan, the story itself is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Race to save all the universe, 2 unlikely friends. Project Hail Mary for me, number 2, and it just recently moved to number 2. Just recently moved to number 2. It's going to be a movie, and I'm excited for the movie. Do not get me wrong. I'm really excited for the movie. However, I'm scared because while I think they'll do Grace really well, I don't know if they'll do Rocky well. I mean, I first off, I got joked about on TikTok because I thought Rocky was like 7 feet tall, but apparently he's the size of like a golden retriever or maybe even smaller. So I'm really looking forward to the movie, but I'm going into it with caution. Like I'm not going to go into it thinking it's going to be like the top greatest movie of all time, just because, again, you just never know when it comes to movies like this. So I'm going in with caution. But the book itself, I highly recommend anybody who is wanting to get into sci-fi, whether or not you are heavy into sci-fi. Project Hail Mary is the one for you. Number two, for sure. All right, and number one. Number one is a book in a series, and it's probably, for me, one of the greatest sci-fi series of all time. One of the greatest sci-fi series of all time, if not number one. Demon and White. And I do have this book ready available because I just finished this book. And this is the best sci-fi book of all time. This is the best sci-fi book of all time. I don't care what anybody else says. This is the best sci-fi book of all time. Demon and White. This has some of the best character work of all time. And the thing that separates this from other sci-fi series that I read is that some of these sci-fi series, it really deals with like the drama and everything like that. This gets to the sci-fi like no other, but it also has such great character work. Hadrian Marlowe is top two characters for me of all time, and absolutely insane. So this is the third book in the series. The first book is called Empire of Silence, and from there you follow Hadrian Marlowe, who he is just trying to figure out what his purpose is in the universe. He's born of high nobility, but he doesn't know if he wants to do that, right? And he travels the entire universe to figure out what he wants to do. He goes from being this high noble to being the lowest of the lows. He goes to being poor. He goes to being broke. He goes to being hurt. And he climbs up that rank in terms of that there. That's Empire of Silence. I won't ruin that from that perspective. But going into Howling Dark, which is book 2, which is somewhere around here. Where's Howling Dark? It's somewhere around here. Oh, where is it? I don't know. But it is one of the best books of all time, too, as well. Howling Dark is the second book in the series, and I thought that was one of the best sci-fi books of all time. And the only reason I added to this list is because I try not to do duplicates on here. It would probably be neck and neck with Morningstar for me in terms of being in my top 5. But I think Morningstar won out just because how that ended from there. But Howling Dark is the second book in the series, and I really love when sci-fi blends well with fantasy. And let me tell you, in Howling Dark, that blend, and in Demon and White, that blend is so amazing. And it really made me a believer in the Sun Eater series. And if you haven't checked out the Sun Eater series, what are you doing? What are you doing? The Sun Eater series is the best sci-fi series of all time. And I'm only 3 books in. I mean, Goodreads, I don't really follow Goodreads, but the ratings on Goodreads is astronomical. Astronomical. It's insane. But then you get through Howling Dark, you get through the shocking scenes of Howling Dark, which they are very shocking, but they are very amazing. And then you get to Demon and White, and my goodness, this book is just so incredible. This book is the best. I don't think the next few books are going to top this book right here in terms of the series, but we'll see. I've been proven wrong. Demon and White is absolutely insane. This is Hadrian Marlowe dealing with all the consequences of book 1, book 2, and really trying to figure out what is going on with him. Half Mortal, that's his nickname. And if you know, you know. And he tries to figure out why he could possibly be the chosen one to end the war of all wars. And Christopher Rocchio does an amazing job of blending sci-fi with fantasy, with great character works, with great battle scenes. There were some times where it got really emotional in this book for me, which sci-fi is very hard to do, especially for space operas. Oh, Demon and White. I'm going to be talking so much about this book for the next few months. And again, I'm going to read the next few books in the series, but I'm a realist here. I don't see it topping. I don't see anything topping this. Demon and White is just so incredible, and I implore all you all to check out the Sun Eater series for sure. All right, I've yapped enough. my top 5 sci-fi books of all time. I am curious, what are your top 5 sci-fi books of all time? I really want to know. Does any of these books fit with what you're looking for there, or what's on your list there? Or talk to me if none of these books make it on your list too. I really want to know what your lists are, because sci-fi is my second favorite genre, and I am really enjoying it now. And I think the Sun Eater series itself is pushing it up to be a 1A, 1B situation with fantasy. And again, I really enjoy it from there. Like I said, this is the last time I'll be down here. This has been fun. Again, I never thought, oh, there's Howling Dark. Howling Dark's right there. Um, I never thought I would start this channel, and I never thought that you all would come and listen to me yap more and more and more and more and more about books. Let me know what more content you want to see. Let me know what more you want to see from me from a standpoint. I will have some more vlogs coming up here. I will start showing a little bit more, but these are my top 5 sci-fi books of all time. As always, everyone, happy reading.